Welcome to the family briefing, your monthly early news roundup. Yes. Every month for the last 24 months, we've been writing up our family briefing, our guide to the most important 10 stories in early years. This time round, 2 years on, we thought it was time to start embracing some new technology and showing you a little bit about what's going on in the early years world in the form of video. First up this month, where else could we start but with Ofsted? This month in January, Ofsted have released their proposed framework for all inspections from early years right up to higher education. The proposed framework is now under consultation, so you can have your say. There's a new early years handbook that you can look over. And when confirmed and switched around in line with the consultation, it's going to be brought in September this year for the new school year. In general, the consultation, it's a bit of a shift. It looks like they're going to introduce a new category called quality of education. And this is in line with their focus to move away from just teaching to the test and trying to actually teach children valuable skills, which seems like it's certainly something we want to aim for. They're also going to be adding a separate behaviour judgment. Now, in general, it seems like these changes are something that the sector is quite happy with. There's certainly some concerns around whether this behaviour judgment is going to be developmentally appropriate for the early years. But it looks like in general there's an increased focus on the characteristics of effective learning. They're looking to put a little more trust in managers' knowledge and hopefully some calls to simplify paperwork. So in general it's looking good. If you want to just go down to the article below you should be able to see all of these links, the new handbook and a brief overview of the key changes. Story number 2, this month CEDA have brought out their early years sector skills survey. Bit of a mouthful, that one. It's all about the skills and the skills shortages that we have in the early years sector at the moment, and it is painting a little bit of a worrying picture. They've reported that within the sector, managers are reporting 4 times as many skill shortages compared to all other sectors. That's a really high number. I think it's something around like 55% are reporting that they've got a skills shortage in their setting. This is obviously having an impact on the kind of quality of education that settings can deliver. Staff workloads are higher as a result. And of course, this doesn't come in isolation. There's actually also been a report this month that as much as 33% of early years staff are claiming benefits and tax credits. I think combining these two together, it is painting a slightly worrying picture, and it seems that the real-term wage cuts that we're seeing in the sector, the recruitment problems, funding inadequacies, it's starting to come home to roost, that's for sure. Item number 3, this is a really interesting study that has come out of Dublin, I believe. It's a study on school preparedness, and it's actually the first study to survey the children themselves about what they think about getting started and the skills that they need to be ready for school. The interesting part of this is that so many school preparedness programs are geared towards maths, reading, writing. This has shown that children have identified 25 different priorities, and chief among those was the social skills necessary to find friends is a big thing. They talked a lot about, for example, having the confidence to ask to go to the toilet. These kind of things that they're just not necessarily used to in a non-classroom environment. It's a really interesting reading, makes for really interesting reading when we think about how you can start to prepare children when they get to that age where they're getting ready to move up to big school. Point number 4, it's another report. This time it's a follow-up from the 2017 report from the Royal College of Paediatricians and Child Health. It's essentially a report all about the state of child health 2 years on from that. In general, some quite good news. They particularly celebrate in England the placement of children at the heart of NHS reform. That's a good thing. We're seeing that the government's slowly starting to increase movements towards better mental health, towards a focus on reducing obesity. But as Nursery World reports, you'll be able to see the article, that link to that article in the full article on our site. Cuts to key public health services and the continued kind of disruption of Brexit is making sure that while these promises are being made, there's not a lot of progress on actually getting them done. That is a bit of a concern. The report also notes a lack of improvement in a bunch of areas, particularly in England: breastfeeding rates, reductions in child poverty and inequality, infant mortality, and tobacco and alcohol control. So there's definitely still a lot of work to be done. This month also Change for Life, actually, again, another link you'll find in the article. They've developed a number of resources for early years settings, helping children in early years settings and primary schools to cut sugar. Really useful resources on there, worth taking a look at, seeing if it might be something that could help in your setting. Sure. Point number 5, we don't mind tooting our own trumpet once in a while. This is a piece we wrote all about building resilience and perseverance in young children. Go down to the page and check it out, give it a read. I think it's a really great piece, all about how you can help children to develop strategies to build their perseverance when they're facing setbacks, to build their resilience so they're ready for kind of when they might have to deal with harder things that come into them in wider life. Super important. Number 6, this is a quick rundown of all the important child development studies that have come out. Quick flash through. First of all, we've got a really interesting report just confirming something that broadly we already know, that reading is so crucial to early language skills. Another report showing that when parents read to their children understand information better, they're more able to develop early language skills as a result. Another interesting report, this was on children with autism spectrum disorder, and it was trying to find out why children with ASD vary so greatly in their language abilities. One thing that was interesting that came out of this was that it looks like children actually have the ability to influence their own learning environment, because it's again just another lesson about there being a back and forth exchange between adults and children, that children influence the way adults deal with them and vice versa, and this can have a big impact on how they develop their language capacity. We've also got an interesting report saying that kids might prefer to make friends with people who talk like they do. This could help you to understand maybe some of the friendship circles that you see developing at your setting. Another interesting report here, something again that is fairly well known, that rhythmic gesture during story time can really help to improve oral skills in children. We've seen a few reports on this before. This specifically showed that by giving practitioners, teachers a short program on how to use rhythmic gesture when doing storytelling, they already saw the outcomes going up. Really interesting, definitely something worth learning more about so that you can help children to develop those oral skills through your story time activities. Last month we covered the slightly worrying news that the EYFS profile is showing us that the gap between children on free school meals and their peers is actually widening. This month, Christian Co have set out through a speech from their head of their managing director of childcare and education to try and raise importance about the issue of the growing divide between more affluent and less affluent nurseries themselves. I think this is a super interesting point that doesn't necessarily get discussed enough, that we have, as Courtney Donaldson's pointed out, nurseries that are doing well are doing very well. They're well prepared for 30 hours. They're in locations that are more affluent, can afford to charge a higher price for add-ons. And at the same time, what that means is that they're able to reinvest in their business, to reinvest in CPD, to reinvest in their staff. At the same time, we have nurseries on the other end of the scale who are barely struggling to survive, and they're just about making ends meet. And this is one of, I think, the real problems with the inadequate funding that we're facing, is that we end up in situations like this. Again, we've also got here this month from Nursery World, a big part of this inequality story is the rise in the closure of children's centres and council-run nurseries. There's an agreement in Norfolk to close 38 of their 53 children's centres. In Salford, there's still an ongoing debate about the closure of their 5 council-run nurseries. It's certainly a worrying problem that looks like it's going to continue into 2019. What would be a family briefing without at least some mention of the 30 hours? This time around, it's a report about 2-year-olds and the take-up of disadvantaged 2-year-old places. There's a report out that shows that in some local authorities, there's a clear correlation between more children accessing 30 hours, and then a lower take-up for disadvantaged 2-year-olds. It's been a concern that I think a lot of people have been worried about, that the inadequate funding levels are meaning that nurseries are kind of having to choose, and it looks like, sadly, they're prioritising the older children, and it's potentially having an impact on the younger disadvantaged take-up. This is the time when we normally do a short business breakdown. Not a massive month for childcare business this month. There are a couple of stories. Childbase have opened their 43rd setting in Twickenham after last year taking over their 42nd. There's a group in, I believe, Gloucestershire, Chestnuts Day Nursery. They've expanded, opening up their 3rd nursery. And there's an interesting story on a nursery group, 5 setting, Kids R Us, who are currently facing a legal challenge from Toys R Us over the name. Interesting one to follow. In other news, this is the part at the end of the family briefing where we go over a few interesting stories in the news. The first one, the Book Trust have launched a new Early Years Book Award. That's going to be shortlisted. The shortlist for that will be revealed in May. There was a really interesting article on The Guardian, as ever, by Michael Rosen. He's talking about the Department for Education and attacking these kind of slightly perhaps half-hearted schemes that they've been coming up with recently, talking about tree climbing, life-saving activities, etc., and whether really they're a bit of an attempt to kind of cover over broader policy cracks. And finally, really interesting piece about actually how children go about drawing themselves at a young age. Sounds a bit crazy, but I thought it was just really interesting to get into the psychology of how children actually struggle to represent themselves psychologically, and actually what goes on when they try and figure out how to draw themselves. Turns out it's got a lot to do with who will see the piece after it's finished, who they know will see the drawing when it's done. They're super interesting insight. Just thought it was kind of a fascinating insight into how a child's mind works. That's it for this week. Hope you've enjoyed trying out this new video format. As I said at the top of the article, let us know what you think. I'm Matt. You can email me on ma@family.co. Would love to hear your feedback, whether there's anything we can do better, what you liked about it. We're hoping to continue to do more and more of this sort of stuff. So yeah, let us know what you think, and we'll see you in a month's time.